Good morning and welcome to our latest ICC Google Hangout on Air. Today we're talking about the Facilitating Trade in the Digital Economy Conference taking place in Geneva on April 8 to 9. Joining us today is Christiaan van der Valk, President of Trustweaver. Christiaan is co-chairing the ICC Task Force on Security and Authentication of the Digital Economy Commission. Christiaan, it's a pleasure to have you here today with us.
Thank you.
Christiaan, perhaps we could just start by saying, explaining to us what the importance of this conference is.
Yeah, sure. We, and when I say we, it's a group of people within the ICC Digital Economy Commission. We came up with the idea for this conference. We saw a couple of things happening out there where we thought the only way to address the issues is by bringing together a large group of people from both business and government. The issues, we sort of struggled with giving it a name. We coined the term Trade Facilitation 2.0. Trade Facilitation 2.0 is just a way of labeling a set of problems that have to do with what we think is a very important paradigm shift, both in international trade and in public administration. What we see is that governments and businesses in the last couple of years have been massively re-engineering their processes, so businesses in supply chain, particularly management and everything that goes with that in e-business all the way up to the consumer, and governments also more recently in how they deal with controls, particularly in their interaction with international trade. So two very large bodies that are re-engineering their processes using information technologies, but not coordinating this very well. These developments create a greater interdependency between business and government, but the lack of coordination creates potentially a very high impact on trade, which is why we thought it was a good time to bring the two groups together.
Can you describe what's causing this paradigm shift?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, businesses have been re-engineering their processes now for quite a long time using information technology. Governments have been rather timid until recently, and I would say just a couple of years ago, it wasn't. Governments were using e-business and ICT mostly for office type applications. All of a sudden, what we've seen is a tidal wave of particularly emerging countries basically taking the internet as a tool to change the way they work and to change the way they interact with businesses and citizens in ways that we've never seen before, which leads to a phenomenon that some people have called always on government, always on internet. This is always on government, basically using ICTs to keep tabs on trade, with processes like real-time clearance of transactions, real integration, complete, direct, always-on integration between businesses and governments, with a massive increase of the number of touch points. These governments we've seen experimenting with these kinds of technologies are being very successful in rolling them out. And they've gone from basically just a few years ago prohibiting certain types of e-business, like the use of paper in invoicing or paper in customs, basically saying you must use paper. We've gone to mandating e-business and saying you cannot use paper anymore, you must use the ICT-based methods that we are imposing on you. The problem with that is that these governments and government agencies are going so fast with this process re-engineering that processes and standards that they use and that they impose by law are very diverse, and that has a very big impact on the way businesses approach their own electronic business procedures. Businesses try to consolidate and centralize as much as possible what they do with ICTs, and this new phenomenon is pulling them in the opposite direction, basically imposing a new trading partner. So there's not just a supplier and a buyer in every transaction anymore. There's also always the government that they need to interact with, but in different ways, which causes a great deal of confusion and costs.
And this is having a very significant impact, isn't it, on e-business systems?
It is very much so, and it's also doing so in a very short period of time, which means that not all that many businesses that are faced with these kinds of challenges at the moment have had the time to bring this up with top management or people in regulatory affairs who could potentially try to address some of these issues, which is typically what happens when diversity of new regulatory approaches gets out of hand. Business starts to call for better harmonization, uniformity of law, some form of coordination. That hasn't happened until now because it's been such a struggle to get things done within the short time frames imposed by government in order to meet requirements. So it's only now that basically, from an ICC perspective, a number of people came together and said, hey, it's time to sound the alarm. It's time to bring these groups together and see if we cannot at least start a global dialogue about a more harmonized approach.
This is the so-called third partner option, the third trading partner.
Yeah. And if there is going to be in every single transaction between businesses a government or public authority, law enforcement agency who also wants to have the data from the transaction for control purposes, there's nothing illegitimate about that. In principle, business or governments have the right in many of these instances under accounting law, customs or tax law to access these data. But if there is going to be that third trading partner in every transaction, then of course that does require a great deal of synchronization. Otherwise, that could lead to catastrophic results and costs for international trade.
We're talking about the Facilitating Trade in the Digital Economy Conference taking place in Geneva on April 8 to 9. Joining us is Christiaan van der Valk, President of Trustweaver. Christiaan, why is the ICC calling this conference now? What is it about 2014 that makes this conference so relevant?
I think it's simply the fact that people are starting to not only see but also feel the risks involved of lack of coordination around this new phenomenon. So now is the time to bring the parties together. You need to start early enough with dialogue and consultation, and we're talking about such big processes that, of course, this is going to take a lot of time to come to some kind of more coordinated approach. 2014 is certainly the year in which we need to start this process, and ICC is certainly planning on making this into more of a sustained dialogue also over the coming years.
And it's also a unique forum for bringing people together, I understand.
Absolutely. What we do see is that there's also a very direct need for businesses, businesses who lack information very often on not only why are these new laws and requirements emerging, but also how should we actually go about this, particularly in the case of their conflicting requirements, all on the same information system from different countries, different laws, etc. Businesses have a need for information very directly today, but the same is true for governments. We talk to a lot of governments who are putting together these platforms, and they are also saying we really would like to have a better understanding of how businesses use ICT for their international trade transactions, for their supply chain management. So there is a big need for bringing people together, first of all, in order to further this policy objective of coordination, making things better in the future. But there's also an immediate need to bring people together so that they can talk about the nuts and bolts. So this conference has these two objectives: make sure that people can also talk about how to make things better in the short term, make sure that people who have an immediate problem or a need for information can get that while coming to this conference.
So, in a nutshell, if I was to attend this conference, what are say the top 5 points that I'd take away from it?
If you're a business, I would say there's a couple. One of them is of course you get to interact with people who make the laws and who run the e-government platforms that you need to integrate with. That's a huge benefit. Those people are not always very accessible. They're very busy themselves. Of course, e-government or government process reengineering takes a lot of time and resources. So if these people get together at this conference, it's a unique occasion to interact with them. Second one is, of course, just influencing policy, influencing the future for your enterprise and your market. Being able to explain what your practical imperatives are as a business. Thirdly, I would say you have an opportunity to share best practice as a business, but also as a government in terms of how you go about these processes, and learn from others. Share information about how you have been doing things, and perhaps learn that others have done it in a different way that might be of interest to you as well. Another one, I guess, is get more of a fundamental understanding of why governments are investing in these areas, and that fundamental understanding has a direct benefit for enterprises as well. So far, a lot of the reaction to these new government mandates has been ad hoc, and there's nothing worse for a company that tries to run a consistent strategy when it comes to global e-business than having to ad hoc within a very short time period intervene and fix things and make things in such a way that you can deal with, I don't know, the Brazilian, the Russian, the Chinese customs or tax type requirements. Taking a step back, which is what this conference also allows you to do, and understand the fundamental underpinnings and the reasons why government do these things, will allow businesses to take more of a strategic approach to these things, which helps reduce costs and risks.
For creating networks with executives, that's also a benefit that people who would attend the conference could take away.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, coming to this conference, I think will help people, as any conference, exchange business cards and views with people who are either in the same situation as they are, or people who they need in their daily interactions with the other side, so to speak. And this network, of course, is something that you can keep with you and build on as you leave the conference and go back to your day job, where you have to confront the kinds of issues that we're talking about here. You can call them up more easily. You've met, you've been to the same conference, and hopefully you are also engaging in a somewhat longer term process in order to make things better.
Christiaan van der Valk, we've been talking about facilitating trade in the digital economy, a conference taking place in Geneva on April 8 to 9. Where can people go to find out more information about this conference?
They can go to the ICC website. You can very easily find information about this conference. The agenda is there. It has a very good group of organizations, including the UN Economic Commission for Europe and various other intergovernmental organizations that are supporting it and helping ICC organize this, helping this conference get the right people to be part of the panels, etc. So the ICC website is the place to go. I would also say there is a very interesting early bird deal that you should take advantage of if you're interested. There's only a few weeks or even days left to do that. So www.iccwbo.org. From there on, you can quite easily find your way to this conference and register.
Christiaan van der Valk has been speaking with us today about the conference taking place in Geneva. Christiaan, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you here with us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference.
So do we. All right.